So I'll bring up a question for us today. If you like visual aids, if you like animals, today's your day. Is Jesus a lion or is he a lamb? Yes. Lion or lamb? Is he both? Can he be both? So that's what we're talking about today, especially as we lead up to today. You see like, oh, the table's set. We get to share the Lord's Supper table together. And before we do that, though, I want us to get really abundantly clear on Jesus Christ. Is he the lion or is he the lamb? Is he the Labrador? I mean, what is he? So let's go to a few scriptures and we'll get there. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9 says, the Lord does not delay his promise, as some understand delay, but is patient with you, not wanting any to perish, but all to come to repentance. So pay attention to that word, patient. Here's another word. Judah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. They provoked him to jealous anger more than all their ancestors had done with the sins they committed. So we got patient, we got provoked. How about one more word with the letter P? God. His way is what? Perfect. The word of the Lord is pure. He is a shield to all who take refuge in him. So we got his promises. He's patient. He's provoked to anger. And then he's perfect. So let's get to the point. I recognize, especially as I look over like older sermons and things I wrote 10 years ago, go, wow, I use a lot of words. And I can almost feel your anxieties like going, Pastor, just get to the point. So I'm starting early with the point. If you tune out or whatever, if you don't know what the thing was about, it's your fault. I'm making the point abundantly clear right now, right here. The point, God's anger is patient, provoked, and perfect. Now, by way of a story, because we all have our own anger, and sometimes we think our anger is patient. Sometimes we go like, well, they provoked me, so my anger was provoked. And sometimes we feel even pretty self-righteous, perfect in our anger. So I'll tell you a story about a time when maybe I got all three right. I'm still not sure, and maybe you can help me decide. So go back with me almost 40 years. And I'm a little boy. I'm about 8, 9 years old maybe. Growing up in Amarillo, Texas, go Amarillo, at least one other Panhandle person with me. Thanks, Becky. And living in a little neighborhood, there's a few houses down from us. There's a boy named Frankie, and he is the bully of the neighborhood. He's a few years older than me, and he's much, much bigger. In fact, he was too big to play football. When you play football in the YMCA as little kids, there's like a weight limit. You can't exceed that limit because you'll hurt other kids because you're too big. That's how big Frankie was. And he was the bully of the neighborhood because anytime I went outside, I was afraid of him, and he was always outside. So I had to go the long way around to the playground because Frankie was there. And I didn't get beat up a lot as a kid, but when I did, it was usually at the fist of Frankie. And beyond the beatings, and I could take a beating, but the worst thing was he bullied me. And one time, sorry kids in the room, one time he actually tricked me to drink a cup that he had peed in. Yeah, that you all got disgusted. You all are like sick with me now, right? You all do not like the bully Frankie. And so Frankie beat me up repeatedly. Frankie tricked me repeatedly. He ruined my childhood in a lot of ways in my little neighborhood growing up. One day, I'm sitting at home watching cartoons, and my brother bursts in through the front door, and he can barely breathe because he just had the breath knocked out of him, and he's just getting his breath back to be able to say something, covered in tears, covered in blood, and he can say one word, Frankie. And my mom's right there, and she's starting to tend to him like a good mom does, and I look out the front door, and I see Frankie across the street. And he's just sneering, that bully, kind of proud of what he has done as he beat up my little brother. And as best as I can recollect, and I fact-checked this with my mom this week. I go, Mom, you remember this? Yeah, you remember this? Mom, do you remember when my brother came in and he was Frankie, and I boiled up with big brother rage, and I'm pretty sure you gave me the nod. And she confirmed, I probably did. The nod that says, sick him. So I bolt through the front door, over the front steps. I'm thinking like, I'm going to weird movies for a second. If you like the Twilight movies, or at least you understand, like when some of the dudes turn into like wolves, I think I turned into a wolf when I crossed over the front threshold and I bound across the street. I bury my head in Frankie's big chest in a perfect form tackle, lift him up and land on him. So now I'm on Frankie's chest. I'm going, you've seen Christmas Story. You're like, I don't get the Twilight movie reference. You get Christmas Story. There's a moment in Christmas Story when little Ralphie beats up the bully, right? I'm having that moment in real life. I'm just swinging on Frankie with all of the fear, all boiled up now into like, I'm going to establish dominance. You cannot be the bully anymore. You will never lay a finger on my brother again. And I'm swinging on him, ground and pound. But Frankie had two brothers. And as I'm pounding on Frankie, I see them out of my peripheral vision. His little brothers, Charlie and Michael, are running. And I had to make a decision. Do I keep pounding on Frankie, or do I retreat or try to get ready to defend myself in front of Frankie's little brothers? You know what they did? They ran up and they started kicking Frankie in the side. Like they've been waiting for this moment. Somebody take out the bully so we can get to work. Now, we're going back to God's anger, not my anger, obviously. God's anger, patient, provoked, perfect. My anger in this story, I would say patient. I took years of beatings until this moment snapped. It was most certainly provoked. You cannot hurt my brother. Was it perfect? My mom texted me this week going, I may have given you the nod, but that didn't make it right. So I'm still not sure if in this moment that anger was perfect. And we'll come back and talk more about Frankie in a little bit. But I want to think about God's anger. Because we're talking about, we're going through the book that we've got like 60 copies of this book. There's still a couple books on the table out by the door. A book called Gentle and Lowly. Jesus describes himself as gentle and lowly. And within just 1 week of sermon, on week 2, I'm already going back to the fierce side of Jesus. Because I believe even in his anger, especially in his anger, we see his humility. We see his gentleness. We see that he wants what's best for us. We see even mercy in the midst of his anger. So you remember when Jesus made a whip? Like there's this time when there was a woman caught in adultery and they brought her to Jesus and he made the whip. He's trying to bait us again. Yeah, that's not what happened in that part of the Bible, right? A woman was caught in the act of adultery. They're trying to trap her and trap Jesus. And instead he says, no, you without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. And they left. The oldest down to the youngest, they left. And then he told the woman, where are your accusers? And then I don't accuse you either, to the point of throwing stones on you to death. But he said, go and sin no more. When did he make a whip, though? When do we see this kind of anger that is patient, provoked, and perfect? We see this in John chapter 2. Looking at verse 13. This is when Jesus makes a whip. The Jewish Passover was near. And so Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling oxen, sheep, and doves. And he also found the money changers sitting there. Now, back in the historical context here, we've got people come to Jerusalem. They're going to offer their sacrifices. If you came from 200 miles away, it's so much more difficult to, bring your sheep with you or bring your oxen. So you would just buy oxen there at the temple. Same concept. If you go to the movies now, you're going, wow, $8 for popcorn? What are you going to do? You go to the AT&T Center, you go to any kind of sports event, they jack up the prices at the resort or at the stadium. It's just what you do. You just deal with it. Unless you're me and you wear the cargo shorts and you smuggle in as much candy and stuff as possible because I'm cheap like that. Now, this is what kind of, it's kind of what's going on, but they've taken it to a whole nother level, and it's a matter of where they've taken it to. We go on in the verse to see what's happening. After making a whip of cords, gentle and lowly? Lion or lamb right here. After making a whip of cords, he, Jesus, drove everyone out of the temple with their sheep and their oxen. He also poured out the money changers' coins and overturned the tables. He told those who were selling the doves, get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace. Maybe your translation says, do not make my Father's house into a den of thieves. And I can just imagine Peter, because Peter's a little impetuous. He's got a little anger issue. I can imagine Jesus turning over the tables and Peter's like, well, we're doing this now? Getting a little, Because those of you with anger issues, those of us with anger issues, we kind of like this story, don't we? We've even used this story to justify our own angry outbursts or our own desires for revenge. We're like, well, Jesus made a whip. Is he the lion or is he the lamb right here? What's he doing? What's going on? Is he perfect? Is he provoked? Is he patient in this? Like, I'm thinking about Jesus, why not get like furious at Caesar's palace? There's plenty of sinful things going on in Caesar's house. Or Herod's got like a whole, harem of harlots and stuff. Go, hey, Jesus, why don't you get mad over there? In fact, as we look at what he's doing, he's not even necessarily mad at the money changers for the fact that they're being money changers and they're taking advantage of the people. He's furious about where they are doing it. Jesus is unlike the average person on Twitter that's outraged about everything. No, he saves his outrage. It is patient, it is provoked, and then it is perfect. Just imagine, like, we're going to share the Lord's Supper table, and imagine if greedy people, consumeristic people just set up a table in front of the Lord's Supper table. Like, you have to go through the greed to get to the Lord's Supper. And Jesus is saying, get that out of here. That has no place here. So he is provoked. He took his time. He made a whip. He didn't just fly off the handle at a moment's notice. He took time to make a whip, and then he went to work. Because this work is full of he's perfect in his power, and he's perfect in his compassion. So I mentioned the book we've been reading, Gentle and Lowly. Dane Ortland wrote this book. We've got a couple free copies still available. I have another book on my shelf. You can borrow it if you want to. It's taking that verse about Jesus being gentle, lowly. Some people say meek and mild. A guy, Mark Galley, wrote a book called Jesus, Mean and Wild, about this untamable God. Like this God that I want to know a little bit more, even though he scares me. I'm like, can he be both? Is he both lion and lamb? Is he gentle and lowly and mean and wild, untamable? I'm going to say yes, he's both. And it's not just mood swings, like he's won one day, like don't mess with Jesus, he's in a bad mood today. Because he is patient. He only shows that wrath, he only shows that anger when it's provoked, and he only does it perfectly. So if Jesus is a lamb, can he go flip around tables? That sounds like more of a lion thing, but what if he's doing both? Or can a little lamb roll away its own tombstone like Jesus rolled away his own tombstone when he didn't stay in the grave anymore? The little lamb, it's a picture of a little lamb going, roll over, roll over. Have you ever seen a sign that says, beware of lamb? Remember I was running, I've shared this story a little bit before. I was running a couple years ago in the woods around my house, and a rainstorm came, and I was stuck in a deep downpour in the middle of the woods, and I heard a deep guttural growl. I couldn't see it because it was raining, but I knew it was close to me, like within 30 yards of me, a deep, deep, angry growl. And my adrenaline shot up, and my hairs went up on my arms. I thought, is this the day I die in running shorts? Obviously, I made it home to tell the story, and I ran home and told my wife, hey, honey, I think I heard a lamb in the woods. Bah. No, I heard, and I went back the next day because I'm like that. I went back to that same spot the next day, and I saw the footprints in the mud, and it was big mountain lion footprints, mama mountain lion. How do I know it was a mama? Because I saw the baby mountain lion footprints next to it. So that lion was, guess what, provoked, not by me on purpose, definitely not poking the lion, but it was protecting its young. It was provoked, and it was a lion. There's no mistaking a lion for a lamb, but Jesus does things here that we're going, it just doesn't seem to match up in our own minds. He's provoked to anger. There's 42 times in the scriptures, God's holy word, there's 42 times it talks about his anger being provoked. Like he's not just mad, you have to get him mad. You have to be, he's provoked to anger, right? He's long-suffering. He doesn't get angry immediately. You have to provoke him. You got to poke the lion to get him there. Do you know what you never have to provoke God to be? Loving, compassionate. Never once do we see in the scriptures that he was provoked to love. We see that Jesus is moved with compassion because he has compassion for us. He is love. God is love. So when Jesus drives out the people in the temple, when they're selling out stuff and taking the whole purpose of the temple away from prayer, he's actually doing a merciful act when he drives them out. He's driving them out of their sin. He's driving them out of what is keeping people from him. So it's actually merciful that he drives them out. This is love and logic at work. If anyone had a better ability to teach love and logic right now, it would be my wife, who lives this well as she raises our boys and as a teacher. But I want us to think about love and logic. I mean, these are good series of books if you're raising kiddos. But just a great way to think on. There's consequences, and God works as a loving father. There's love and there's logic. It is patient, it is provoked, it is perfect. So thinking about love and logic like this, like if you got young kids and they're fighting over Legos, the logical thing is not to say you're grounded from TV. Now, if your kids are fighting over Legos, what do you ground them from? Legos. Yeah, see, this works. Love and logic. If they get you mad, it's not always a spankable offense. Just, whatever it is, just roll out the spankings. Get a belt. I only spanked Cooper twice. I asked Cooper if I could share this story about, anger, and he said I could. And that first story about beating up Frankie, maybe got 2 out of the 3 provoked perfect patience. Maybe I'm 2 out of 3 on that one. On this one, I'm for sure at least just 1 out of 3. The story is when Cooper's just a toddler, maybe 3 years old. We're in the bookstore, because that's what we do. We're always in the bookstores. And he throws just a flat-out tantrum when it's time to leave, because he doesn't want to leave the bookstore. And having a tantrum in a bookstore is like deeply embarrassing, right? Because it's quiet in there. Like if you want to have a tantrum, go ahead and do that at Chuck E. Cheese, where no one will even know you're having a tantrum because it's just loud. But a tantrum in the bookstore, I'm embarrassed, I'm flustered, he's flailing. I just kind of pick him up because he's still at the age where I can just pick him up and take him out. I take him out to the parking lot. I'm mad, provoked, not patient at all, definitely not perfect, because whether you think on spanking or not, if you're spanking, at least I've heard you've got to explain why you are spanking, give the reason there. And do not spank in anger, which I didn't either. I didn't tell him why I was spanking. I was just mad. I was flustered. I just pow, and I strapped him into his little car seat and got ready to drive. This is the day that Cooper, at a young age, learned how to unbuckle his car seat. He had never done it till then, That day, he had the dexterity and the reason to get out of his car seat while I'm going down 1604, 70 miles an hour. He has taken himself out of his car seat and from behind the driver's seat has begun to flail on me because I have invoked my anger on him, and he knew it wasn't right. So as a young little boy, 3 years old, Cooper started knocking me in the jaw while I'm driving. So I'm trying to steer and get my son back. And we pull over, and I realize this is an occasion where we need to talk it out, to work it out. So we had a talk on that moment. So would you agree that my anger in that moment was maybe provoked, definitely not patient, and most certainly not perfect? And so when we try to think that God is like us, he's on our level, because we can't understand how it can be a lion and a lamb at the same time. But God always gives warning. He always gives reasons for his wrath, because it's logic and it's love at the same time. Like when God would put his people into exile. We see this all over the Old Testament. It seems like it keeps going on again and again. His people would be so unfaithful. And the most loving, logic thing to do for them would be to let them be captured, absolutely, into like Babylon as a Persian exile. They're like, we're going to let you be captured by the pagans who you are being worse than. You're being worse than them, so I'll let you go be with them. But I'm also going to rescue you. I'm going to put love and logic at work here. So he's provoked to anger, but his anger is always a perfect anger. We don't ever, maybe a few times in your life you get a perfect anger provoked. Because I know for me, even my compassion isn't always perfect. Sometimes we'll do something compassionate, And then we'll look around and see who saw it happen. Right? God is perfect in his anger. He's perfect and sinless in his compassion as well. So I mentioned the Old Testament. We'll go to Lamentations. And one of these times when God's people are in exile, you were really looking forward to some Lamentations being brought up in church today, weren't you? One of those most often neglected books in the Bible, written by the prophet Jeremiah. He's known as the weeping prophet. So I just want to read some of this, and I want us to see where God's compassion, where God's patience is. It starts like this. Like I quote these verses a lot. Just in prayer in my life, we have a sign in our library that says this. It says, yet I call this to mind, and therefore I have this hope. Because of the Lord's faithfulness, the faithful love, we do not perish, for his mercies never end. They're new every morning. I quote that, I live that, I breathe that. That's good. As great as his faithfulness. And it goes on. I say the Lord is my portion, therefore I will put my hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the person who seeks him. It's good to wait quietly for salvation from the Lord. It's also good for a man to bear the yoke while he's still young. Let him sit alone and be silent, for God has disciplined him. Disciplined him, perfect, patiently, provoked to discipline. Let him put his mouth to the dust. Perhaps there's still hope. Let him offer his cheek to the one who would strike him. Let him be filled with disgrace. Oh, please don't let the verse end there. Oh, for the Lord will not reject us forever. Even if he causes suffering, he will show compassion according to the abundance of his faithful love, for he does not enjoy bringing affliction or suffering on mankind. Okay, a little bit of group work if we can right now. Like, I hate group projects, and I have to do all the work and speak out loud. No, a little group work with me, if you will. What's like your favorite word in this passage of scriptures? Or what's your favorite phrase? What do you see that just resonates? Tell me out loud. Yeah. Show compassion. What else? Faithful love. Not reject us. What else? Two more. Somebody say out loud. What are you seeing? That the valedictorian said what?
Does not enjoy bringing affliction.
Yeah. Cindy Feltz, I won't always call you the valedictorian. It's just fun. Yeah, he does. He's not enjoy bringing the affliction. Like when your mama spanks you. I don't know if you ever got spanked. My mama always said, mama said, sorry. Mama always said, this hurts me worse than it hurts you. And it's true, because she would cry and I wouldn't. Until one day she got so tired of spanking me and my brother, she let my brother and I choose to spank each other. And I showed compassion on my little brother Wayne. I said, I'm all going to spank you, brother. It's okay. And then she said, okay, Wayne, it's your turn. And he took the belt and he laid into my backside harder than anyone ever has. He whooped me good. And he enjoyed it. Was he perfect? No. God doesn't enjoy bringing the affliction or the suffering on mankind. So in fact, I would think about, has anyone ever suffered more for mankind than Jesus? So we come back to our theme verse for this series. Jesus speaking, he says, come to me, all who labor, all who are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn from me. I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So come all of you who are heavy laden. And so I'd ask this question of just us. It's kind of a reflective moment before we come to the Lord's Supper table. And if you come to the Lord's Supper table without kind of taking some reflection time on yourself, then you do it wrong. So the question for reflection then is aren't some of your deepest heavy laden burdens the direct result of the unforgiveness inside you? Like deep inside, you still have not forgiven the wounds of that person or that people or even that church. On the surface level, I forgive them, whatever. But deep down, I have not forgiven them. And so I forgave Frankie a long time ago. I mean, he was a bully, and that's mean. Some of the things I didn't tell you about Frankie, and probably the reason he was always outside is because in his home, it must have been a terribly abusive family. His dad didn't have a nose. Like straight up Voldemort stuff. His dad didn't have a nose because the dog bit it off during one of just a drug-induced frenzy. And so growing up in that kind of home where we always went by the house and Mama never let us go to that house because it just always reeked of drugs. And so that's the environment that Frankie grew up in. And I'm not dismissing it just because he had a hard life, but I'm forgiving him because I've been forgiven. And in fact, the abuse I took from Frankie as a little boy doesn't even compare to some of the abuse I've taken from people in church. None of you. And if it was you, I'd forgive that too, because I don't want to come to the Lord's Supper table today with bitterness in my heart. Right? I want to get better through what God has done. God has forgiven us. His yoke is easy, his burden is light. We're heavy laden by our unforgiveness. So my challenge to you today is that whatever those burdens of unforgiveness, that you would be patient with it. That you would be provoked in ways that lead you closer to God. That you get angry about the things that he gets angry about. But then you be perfect in what you do, perfect in your response. I pray that we would forgive well. We'd forgive abundantly those who have hurt us as we come to the Lord's Supper table. Because thinking about Jesus, he's sharing this Lord's Supper table with his disciples that are about to just run away and leave him alone in his greatest need. He's about to ask them to pray with me, and they can't even stay awake to pray. And Judas is going to go off and sell out Jesus. And all of this, Christ is preparing a meal for us. And he's taking the cup. So this cup is a new covenant. My blood poured out for you. Like the cup of God's wrath that comes onto sinful people. Christ says, I'm going to take the cup of God's wrath. Not because I deserve it, because I'm sinless, but because I love you. And out of love and what seems to be an incredibly illogical thing to do, he gives himself. And he takes the cup and he gives. And he took the bread as well. He said, this is my body. He broke the bread in a way that we would see and symbolize that Christ would be absolutely given for us. No bone in his body broken, but absolutely broken in spirit as he would cry out to the Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. There's an absolute trust at work here. Why? Because he knew that God was perfect, always perfect in his anger, always patient. And when he is provoked, he will get to work. So he is the lion and he is the lamb in this meal.